Greetings and welcome to my latest vlog. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I've read, so this is a kind of reading guide, all about the western part of the Balkans. Now you might first of all think, well, where is that? Because there are like lots of definitions on where is the Balkans, where isn't, and that's something I've discussed in my own writings. But what I'm going to be talking about today is basically books to read if you are interested in or going to or have been to what was the former Yugoslavia, so Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Macedonia and Kosovo, and also Albania. I am going to deal with the other parts of the Balkans later, but that's these. And you might say, well, Matt, why are you trying to cover so much in one video? Because there is a lot to cover there. But the problem is, particularly because all of those countries, bar one, were until very recently all part of the same country, Yugoslavia, then all the books kind of go into one another. And a lot of them talk about the Yugoslavian wars, which, you know, didn't stay in just one country. And so that's why I'm dealing with them all together. And that's great, because I also believe that the Balkans shouldn't be taken country by country, but should be seen as a whole. Because one thing that is so clear when you go to the Balkans is that, you know, they've all got claims on each other's countries, and, you know, one culture runs into another, and you'll often get two cultures sitting side by side, and they have done for centuries. And that's an essential part of what the Balkans is. It's never fitted easily into the straitjackets of national states in the way that, for example, France and Spain have done. And of course, I suppose all the wars are proof of that. But anyway, this is my guide to the Western Balkans, and the first thing I've got to say is that it's an amazing part of the world to visit, but it's also arguably the best part of the world to read about. There is so much good stuff written about the Western Balkans, so please listen to the recommendations in this video, because do you know what? There are some cracking books in this. Okay. So, what have we got? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the books in different categories. And the first category that I'm going to look to is kind of factual books. Factual books all about the Western Balkans. And the first one I'm going to talk about is this one. This is called Balkans 1804 to 1999, Nationalism, War and the Great Powers. It's by Misha Glenny. Misha Glenny is well known here in Britain. He's always on the radio. He's a really good, solid historian, and if you want a good background to what is going on around the whole of the Balkans, then this book is good. I read it back in 2009 in Albania, when I was going through Albania. Yeah, of course I didn't take it all in. It's something I'm going to read again later. But it really gave me the good overall picture. It's quite a hefty read. We're talking about almost 700 pages. I've got this from the library. But yeah, I recommend this book. It's a good overview. It's readable as well, despite being so big. So that's my big general overview. But if I'm going to then go into more particulars, it's these two books. Kosovo, A Short History, and Bosnia, A Short History, and they're both by Noel Malcolm. And actually, many years ago, I was working with a chap who'd been in Yugoslavia during the wars. He worked for the RAF, and he said these are the books that the intelligence tell their soldiers to read before they go out there, because they're deemed as pretty good basic guides to those countries. Have to say, they're both very good books, and even though I knew quite a lot on the subject, which, you know, I've studied at university and I've also read a lot about before, I learnt some good stuff off both of these. I think from the Bosnian one I learned a lot about the Bogomils and the early Bosnian church, which was something I was really not clued up about. And the Kosovo one, which I think is the better of the two. I think this is a really, really good book. It is, as you can see, much thicker. But just, you know, so he's obviously done a lot more research on it. But the Kosovo one is really good. And it really explains, you know, just why there are issues between the Serbs and the Albanians in Kosovo, and it dispels a lot of the myths around 1389 and the Battle of Kosovo Field, and, you know, myths about Albanians populating Kosovo in the last century because of their higher birth rates, you know, and driving Serbs out. Really good book, really good book. This one's good as well, but this one is the better of the two. But I think if you were going to either of these countries, if you don't read anything else, read these. They're great books. Okay, so that's those. The last kind of factual book that I'm going to recommend is this one, and I really like this book. And actually, I don't even know which category to put it in, because it's almost like a travel book, but it's called Why Angels Fall, A Journey Through Orthodox Europe from Byzantium to Kosovo. So obviously it's not just about the Western Balkans, right? This covers, Russia and also the Eastern Balkans and other places, but it's all about orthodoxy. And yes, the Balkans is known, or was known at one time as Turkey in Europe. There's a big Muslim influence. There are Catholic parts, particularly you look at Croatia, you look at parts of Albania. But actually, if there is one religion that you really need to know a bit about, particularly when we look at how a lot of the wars have panned out in recent years, it's Orthodox Christianity. And Victoria Clark really goes into it in a respectful but enlivened way. And I'm just trying to think what the quote was. It was a very, very good quote. And I think it was at the beginning. And it said, you know, if... where was it? I'll see if I can find it. No. No, it was something about, like, if the, you know, we say, like, the Catholic Church has lost its soul. So if the Catholic Church has lost its soul, then why has the Orthodox Church lost its mind at times? And how it seems so obviously mysterious, which it always has done, but so irrational at times, and how it's been such a defining factor between a number of wars, particularly those involving Serbia, but not just those. So if you want to understand the Orthodox, it's a great introduction. Makes you want to become Orthodox at the end, or at least it did for me. Okay, so those are the factual books. Now, what I'm going to look at are travel literature. And the first one I'm going to start with is this one by Paul Theroux, who's one of the most famous travel writers in the world ever. I like Paul Theroux's work, although he's a little bit miserable at times, I have to say. And this one's called The Pillar of Hercules, a grand tour of the Mediterranean. And it is what it says on the front. It is a tour around all the Mediterranean coast, from one Pillar of Hercules, as in Gibraltar and then Morocco across on the other side, all the way around to the other. And as such, the Western Balkans is only a small part of it. The reason I've included this in here, it's a great book, it's a great overview book, but it was the first bit of travel literature that I ever read about the Western Balkans, before I'd even been there, I think. No, well, I'd been to Greece, but and there are chapters where he goes through Yugoslavia, as was when it was splitting up, and they're quite evocative, those chapters. And there's also a very good chapter where he travels through Albania, and I remember he pays $100 for a taxi driver to take him through Albania. And it was, you know, when Albania really was a mess straight after communism. Really raw and powerful travel experience, told by one of the greatest travel writers. I mean, I read this in 1997, so I travelled very little myself at the time. I actually read it going across the Sinai Desert. But yeah, it's a good book. It's a good book. I would recommend this, but it's not just about the Western Balkans. While I'm on there, there was another book that I read at a similar time that covers slightly a bit in Yugoslavia. It's very good. It's Bill Bryson, Neither Here Nor There. and that is his account of travels in Europe. They're very eclectic. He'll jump from one place to the other. But the Yugoslavia bit's relevant. Yeah, it's worth a read. Okay, that's the general stuff. Now, the first work of travel literature that I read specifically about the area was this one, The Accursed Mountains by Robert Carver. And this really blew me away. But it's a very difficult book. It is well written, right? You know, it's the kind of book, it's a page turner. And he travelled around in, I think it was 1996. It may have even been before then, so pretty much after, just soon after the fall of communism. And the country that he describes is this kind of wild west of Europe. It's mental, it's dangerous, but it's fascinating. And one of my favourite passages of travel literature ever, when he went up the on the Komani ferry to the Light of the Party Dam, and when he saw the dam and he saw how spectacular it was, he said, you know, say what you want about Enver Hoxha and the communists, but that is amazing, and I can't imagine the Albanians doing that now. And it was almost like I'd come across something from a lost civilization, and yet it was only 10 years ago. And it is so powerful. It's a brilliant book. It made me want to go to Albania, and it certainly made me want to go on the Koman ferry. So it did its job. That said, everybody that's read it, and indeed after I've been to Albania, I can say this myself, it's not actually an accurate picture. Albania was never that bad. It was never that wild. And actually an Albanian friend of mine read it, Marian Samai, and he was really offended by it. Wrote a letter to the author saying that this isn't Albania. And you know, if you read the reviews on Amazon and stuff like that, they all say, mate, this is, you know, overblown. It's not like this. It's inaccurate. So, yeah, a rollicking good read, but not, you know, take it with a pinch of salt. So that's that one. And while we're on the Albanian subject, there's this one, which is called High Albania, A Victorian Traveller's Balkan Odyssey by Edith Durham. Now, this is an incredible book, and by an incredible lady. And Edith Durham was a Victorian female traveller, and she basically went and lived amongst the highlanders of northern Albania, and she walked from village to village, and she was very much an amateur anthropologist, and she sketched everything that she saw, and some of her wonderful sketches are in here. I'm just trying to find a good one now. So she was a recorder of folk detail, and she went all through the Northern Highlands, so it doesn't touch southern Albania at all, but she went all through the Northern Highlands, looking at, you know, staying really roughing it with some pretty primitive and, you know, remote tribes. So yeah, this, and drawing pictures as she went. So look, there's one. She was quite an accomplished artist. And it's just amazing to think of a single female. I think she got bored in England with, you know, the whole role that females were meant to fit in, and she just went out to Albania and just lived like some wild woman, you know, very much like a modern backpacker would. A woman ahead of her time. And it's a great book. It's a rollicking good read again. And while we're on the subject of her, then a few years ago I picked up this, which is called Edith and I on the Trail of an Edwardian Traveller in Kosovo by Elizabeth Gowing. And you know, I was like, whoa, it's about Edith Durham. You know, I'm gonna get this book. So I did. I read it and I was really disappointed. I do not recommend this book. And the reason I don't recommend it is it's really badly researched. You know, okay, so Elizabeth Gowing, who'd gone to live in Kosovo, I forget why. I think her husband was involved in the NATO stuff there, but I might be wrong on that. So she'd gone to live in Kosovo. She got into Kosovo. She liked Kosovo. I don't have a problem with that. And she got into marry Edith Durham, and that's brilliant. And so she decided to write a book about her. Great. But the fact is, it's all about Kosovo. And yet, Edith Durham briefly visited Kosovo at the end of her travels. Most of her work and her passion were the highlands of northern Albania, which she never goes to. She makes a fleeting visit to Albania. And you're like, well, I'm sorry, that's lazy. If you're going to write a book about Edith Durham, actually go to the places that she was talking about. Rather than sit in Kosovo, in Pristina, which she passed through once, talking about her love for Kosovo. Her love was not for Kosovo. Her love was Albania and the Albanian people, who of course are also to be found in Kosovo. What is good about this, though, is it does talk about the English side of Edith Durham. So if anybody has read High Albania or wants to find out more about Edith Durham, then this book is good from that perspective. Now, possibly, arguably, the greatest work of travel literature ever. This is the best travel book that I have ever read. And I cannot, it's a monster. It is, to quote a million book reviews, a tour de force. This is Rebecca West, Black Lamb and Grey Falcon. And Rebecca West, she's a well-known author. It's, over 1,000 pages long, and she travels throughout the Western Balkans. Well, she travels throughout Yugoslavia. I don't think she ever gets to Albania. If she does, it's not for long. This is a work of travel literature, but it is also a history book. It is also personal memoirs. It is a whole lot else, because I think all this is written on about 6 weeks of travel, which, look at the size of it. Absolutely incredible. There are so many good bits of this book. They're just, you could talk all day about this book. One bit that always I remember, I think she was in, it might have been Kosovo or southern Serbia, and she went to a mining town and there was a tennis club, and they played tennis with the Serbs. And, the British are just so much better than the Serbs. The Serbs are, tennis amateurs. And yet, I'm reading this in the era of Novak Djokovic, who's the world's greatest tennis player. And so many, so many amazing Serbs on the tennis courts. And yet back then it was the other way around. Please read this book. Even if you're never even interested in the Balkans, just read it as a work of literature. On the back it says, impossible to put down, both timeless and of its time, a travel book, an epic narrative history, brimming with passion, anger, scholarship and intuition, hatred and love. I couldn't put it better myself. That was The Observer. It is from 1942, that's when it was first published. It was all written obviously just before the war. The only thing I would say is, as a contrast, for every bit that Edith Durham is partisan-like pro-Albanian, Rebecca West is a partisan for the Serbs. So she would take the Serbian side in things, whereas Edith Durham would take the Albanian. And, I think that needs to be pointed out from the point of balance. But that's not to say that Durham is right and West is wrong or vice versa. But I think that, this lady is very pro-Serb. So, maybe certain, Croat-friendly people or Albanian-friendly people might rankle a bit. But look at it as a work of literature. And I suppose the other point that should be made is because she is so pro-Serb, it is quite Serb-centric in terms of the areas she talks about. Okay. What else have we got? We have, this one. Yes, this one. Balkan Ghosts, A Journey Through History. It's about late 90s. It's a Robert D. Kaplan. He's an American journalist. He spends time in the Balkans and he writes about different things he sees. It's okay, but the main focuses not really on the areas that we're so interested in this video. But, it's a timepiece, it's readable. And this one's rather good. It's called Through Another Europe, an anthology of travel writing on the Balkans. And these are little excerpts of travel writing on all the Balkan countries, so including the ones we're not talking about in this video. And there are some, some bits are better than others, but it goes back to the 1600s, 4 centuries. And so you really get an idea of the Balkans through time, which is good. Okay, so those are my travel books. Now I'm going to go on to personal memoirs, I suppose. Yes, and to be honest, there's well only the one I think that I can talk about today, but it is rather good, and anybody who is interested in Albania will know this man's name, Enver Hoxha. This guy was the guy who ruled Albania for several decades. He was, he's talked about as a dictator, he's talked about as a tyrant, but whether you love him or loathe him, and my view is mixed. I think he did do a lot of good stuff, and I think Albania probably needed a strong hand. And interestingly, King Zog, who came before him, was also quite autocratic. But whether you love or loathe Hoxha, he is a seminal figure, and anyone who wishes to understand not just Albania, but the Balkans at large, needs to understand Hoxha. And this one is called Laying the Foundations of the New Albania. And it's basically his memoirs of the war. So when just before the war and during the war, when he was a partisan, when he was leading the communists, when he was forming the Communist Party and forming the new state. And I have to say, I read it because I felt I had to, and I expected it to be hard going. And I raced through it, and I really enjoyed it, and I found it really personal and really, really readable. And it made me want to go to lots of places in Albania that I haven't been to before. But it also reveals a lot about his character, particularly his paranoia. He does come across as quite a paranoid guy who's all the time busy, slating his rivals and putting them down, which was, to be fair, became a feature of his realm. And also, I suppose what you could say is that, well, look, it was written in the 80s, so, it was as much a product of that time when he felt himself surrounded by enemies and he was very paranoid, as it was of the time that he's writing about. But it's a really good book. Really get this. I think it's great. It gives a great great overview on Albanian history and politics. And actually, while we're on that, I realised there was one book that I forgot earlier. And that's this. If I'm talking about Albania, there is actually a trilogy of books that you need to read. And I'm reading the first one now. So this one is called Albania and King Zog. And it's volume 1 of Albania in the 20th Century, A History, by Owen Pearson. And I've virtually finished it. I'm that far in now. I'm on 1938. And it's actually done, if I just open up a random page, as diary entries. So, whenever he's found something that's happened on that day, he's put it in. That means that it's not the most readable of books, but it's really good and really detailed and really lets you get into the minutiae of Albanian history. I've learnt loads from it, I have to say. And he is quite pro-Zog. I mean, he was a very upper-class Englishman that wrote this book. And he was quite pro-Zog. So I'd be very interested to see what the next 2 volumes are like when he talks more about Enver Hoxha and the communists. He did visit communist Albania twice as well. So there's that one. Well, of course, we're on Enver Hoxha as well. I've also got this little book here, Enver Hoxha, 25 Years of Struggles and Victories on the Road to Socialism. This is a series of his speeches which kind of, I suppose, follows on from laying the foundations of New Albania, and this talks, you know, about building the country over the years. To be honest, it's not gone into as much depth and interest as I wanted, but it's only a little, isn't it? Yeah, worth a read. Okay, my next category are works of, well, guidebooks. And the first guidebook that I had was this one, Western Balkans by Lonely Planet. Now, people who've seen my guidebook videos before will know that I like Lonely Planet, but I think they've gone downhill, and also they will know that I think that you shouldn't try to cover too much in one book. And this one definitely tries to cover too much in one book, because it covers the whole region that we're talking about. There's the map. And so, to be honest with you, it wasn't that useful when I went travelling. I've had better books than that one. It's good. It's good if you're passing through, or if you're on an organised tour where most of the stuff's taken care for you. Yeah, I get it, but it's not that good. Now, and people who know my taste in guidebooks will know what I'm going to advertise next, but it's the Brad Guides. I love Brad Guides, and this one, Brad Albania, was the first ever Brad Guide that I bought. It is an incredible book. Gillian Gloyer, who wrote it, obviously has a massive passion for Albania, and this comes through. It's a really good, really thorough guidebook. It is one of the best guidebooks I've ever read. Get this book. That's amazing. If you're going to Albania, don't think about not getting it. And I have also used the Bosnia and Herzegovina one as well. And not up to the standards of the Albania one, but still a very, very good guidebook. Again, I recommend them thoroughly. Brad also do individual guides, I think, for every country of the Western Balkans, including Macedonia, Montenegro, Kosovo, and the ones that I flick through, they all look good. So yeah, please get those. And while I'm on the subject of guidebooks, I did actually once borrow from a guest house, but I had to give it back, the Pristina in my pocket. And that has all in your pocket guides are very good. So yeah, I recommend that. Finally, I've got works of prose, and there are three here. There's some more I want to talk about, but the first one is this one, Ivo Andrić, The Pasha's Concubine and Other Tales, and I picked this up in Japan. In fact, no, I'm telling a lie. I've written it here. I picked it up in New Zealand in 2000. And it's some short stories by Ivo Andrić on, well, it just says Yugoslavia because it was published in that time, but they're actually mostly Bosnia. Ivo Andrić is a fascinating guy. He was ethnically a Croat, very pro-Yugoslav, involved with the government, but he was born in Bosnia. And he had a passion for Yugoslavia, but he had a passion in particular for Bosnia. And he was a Nobel Prize winner. And I've read this by him. These short stories are a great introduction to his work. And I've read two novels. One of them is the Travnik Chronicles, which is very good. And that's all about Travnik, a small town in Bosnia, and during the early years of the 20th century when there was different consuls there from the great powers. But by far and away the best book I've read by him. One of the best novels I've ever read is this. Ivo Andrić, The Bridge Over the Drina. It won him a Nobel Prize. It was the reason I went to Visegrad, which was the highlight of my Trans-Balkan trip in 2011, I think that was. And wow, what an incredible book. It really makes you understand Balkan history, makes you understand why the Serbs are angry. It can make you understand why the Muslims are angry. It makes you understand why whether they're angry or not, they're all intertwined with one another. A monumental book. And it's really unusual in that the main character in this novel is a bridge. And that might sound a bit weird, but basically the novel starts when the bridge is built in the 1500s, and it ends when the bridge has one of its piers blown, so it ceases to become a bridge. I think it's just after the First World War, or just before. And it's the story of the little town, Visegrad. And to me, what makes this book so good is that, you know, you can actually go to Visegrad today. The bridge is still there. It's beautifully preserved, and you can walk through. You can walk across the bridge. You can walk through the streets, and you can really live what he described. And also, I mean, this is not nice. It's quite tragic, but Visegrad has a history that's happened since that book was written that is just as remarkable and just as tragic as anything that he wrote about, and so it's worth going there to discover that as well. Okay, my last book in this review is Montenegro by Starling Lawrence. He's an American author. I think it might even be his first novel, and it's a very good novel, and it's about a young Englishman who goes to Montenegro before the First World War, so there's loads of great power intrigue stuff, falls in love with the girl and the culture, as they always do. It's a really good snapshot. It's really beautifully written, and anybody who's going to Montenegro and who does like I did, but goes to the Bay of Kotor, which is one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and then climbs up that very steep road to go to Chechnya, yes, read this book. Okay, that's the end of my review. In a way, I'm very sorry it took so long, much longer than my normal reviews do, but in a way it had to, because do you know what? There is so much good stuff written about this region, and that's so refreshing, because in a lot of regions that I've been to, you really struggle to find decent stuff to read. In the Western Balkans, there's more than enough of it. And all I can say is please, please, please take up some of the recommendations in this video, read them, but more importantly, go there. The Balkans are one of the most incredible regions on this planet. Please, please go there. Please experience them for yourself. But in the meantime, thanks for watching and keep travelling.